Hello everyone. So in the last class we have discussed about peptic ulcer disease. Today in this class we are going to discuss gastroesophageal reflux disease, that is GERD. Okay. So before going to that topic, most of the symptoms of PUD and GERD will be almost similar. So you should not get confused when you are differentiating these two conditions. Okay. Now coming to definition, what is GERD? Gastroesophageal reflux disease. That means, see, this is esophagus, this is the stomach. So in between this, the contents has to come from here to here and then to here, right? But in case of this disease, gastroesophageal reflux disease, that means the contents of this gastric region, that is from the stomach region, gets refluxed into the esophagus. So the name it is called as gastroesophageal reflux disease. Okay. So when coming to the standard definition, gastroesophageal reflux disease occurs when refluxed stomach contents cause troublesome symptoms or complications. That means when these gastric contents were refluxed into the esophagus, it may cause some kind of troublesome symptoms. That means the contents of the gastric region will be acidic. Why? Because the acids like gastrin and pepsin will be released in the stomach. So when it gets mixed with that contents, it will be a bit acidic in nature. So when these contents gets refluxed into the esophagus, what would happen? There will be burning sensation in the esophagus region. And if it is continuing for a longer duration, it leads to further some kind of complications. Okay. So what is GERD? GERD occurs when the refluxed stomach contents causes troublesome symptoms of complications. Clear? Then pathophysiology. In pathophysiology, as I said that if you consider this diagram, there is a sphincter over here between the esophagus and the stomach. So what does it do? Actually, the pressure, as you know, general principle, when there is travel from high pressure to low pressure. So when the pressure is more, and here when the pressure is less, this sphincter gets opened, and then the contents from the esophagus enters into the stomach. But this will not take place in case of, this will be reversed in case of GERD. That means defective lower esophageal sphincter pressure or function. So that function is not taking place properly. Then what would happen? The contents will not pass from the esophagus into the stomach. Instead, they gets refluxed from the stomach into the esophagus. So the patients may have decreased LES pressure from spontaneous transient LES relaxations. So the sphincter should be like contracted and then it should relax, contract and relax. But in case of this condition, due to transient, that means for short time, it gets it takes relaxation. That means it will be in relaxed condition, so that the contents may not get passed from the esophagus to the stomach. So they may have decreased LES pressure. So transient increase in intra-abdominal pressure, and the intra-abdominal pressure is more. See, usually here the pressure is more, but here the pressure is less. So the contents cannot come from here, right? So as this pressure is more, it will reflect the contents to the esophagus. Here the pressure, if the here is the pressure is more, then it will push the contents into the stomach. But that is not the thing. Here there is no pressure over here. That means decreased pressure. So the contents cannot easily pass from esophagus to stomach. And instead that this intra-abdominal pressure is high. So from high to low, generally things move from high concentration to low concentration, high pressure to low pressure region. In the same way, the contents will move from high pressure region to low pressure region. This is intra-abdominal pressure. Here LES means lower esophageal sphincter pressure. Okay. So what is that? Defective lower esophageal sphincter pressure or function. In that, patient may have decreased LES pressure due to spontaneous transient relaxations, and also there is a transient increase in the intra-abdominal pressure or an atonic LES. That means lower esophageal sphincter is atonic. Atonic tonicity means it has some tone to move, to make contractions and relaxations. If it loses that nature, then also it causes the GERD. Okay. And the other is failure of mucosal defense mechanisms. In what is that? Mucosal membrane is there to provide some kind of buffering nature, and also it acts as an it also prevents some bacteria or the viruses to get entered into that, and that will be, the defense mechanism will be lost. In that, what would happen? Abnormal esophageal anatomy, that means the anatomy of the esophagus will be varied, and improper esophageal clearance of gastric fluids. Gastric fluids are not get removed from the esophagus into the stomach. That means due to improper clearance of gastric fluids and reduced mucosal resistance to acid. Mucosal layer is um, alkaline in nature, but when it is alkaline in nature, then only it can act as it is resistant to acid, but this nature will be lost. Delayed or ineffective gastric emptying. See, whatever the contents it is there, it has to get emptied from the stomach, and then it has to enter the duodenum, then into the large intestine. But this process will not be taken place. So the contents will remain in the stomach for a longer duration of time, and then they will get reflexed into the esophagus. And inadequate production of epidermal growth factor. Why is this epidermal growth factor required? Epidermal growth factor is required to heal the damaged epithelial layer. So because of this, when there is no production of epidermal growth factor, whatever the thing which is damaged cannot be healed. So thereby it further worsens the GERD. And reduced salivary buffering of acid. Saliva acts as a buffer for acid. So because of decreased production of saliva, or because of its inefficient to pass from the stomach to the intestine, so it also causes more acidic. It also creates more acidic nature in the esophagus. Then esophagitis. Itis means inflammation. That means inflammation of the esophagus occurs when the esophagus is repeatedly exposed to refluxed gastric contents. So as they are acidic in nature, when it is repeatedly gets exposed to that, there will be redness and swelling, edema will be there. That is, we call it as esophagitis. If it is further getting worsened, if this further progresses, it leads to erosion of the squamous epithelium of the esophagus. That means the whole squamous layer will be eroded. That means it will be removed because of this effect of acid on this layer. So that we call it as erosive esophagitis. If it is for short duration, we call it as esophagitis. And if it is continuously progressing, then we call it as erosive esophagitis. The name itself indicates that erosion of something. So here, erosion of squamous layer of the squamous epithelium of this esophagus. I said reflexuate. What does it contain in the reflexuate? Gastric acid, pepsin, bile acids, and pancreatic enzymes. These two are produced in stomach. Bile acids is produced from the liver, pancreatic enzymes from the pancreas. All these enzymes gets mixed in the stomach and they'll digest the food. But instead of digesting the food, instead of being in the stomach, they gets reflexuated into the esophagus, further causing adverse effects or some kind of effects on this esophagus, right? So depending on the composition, like which is more, and to what extent the esophagus got exposed to that, and the duration of exposure, depending on all these, the severity of GERD will be there. Okay. Composition and volume of reflexuate and duration are the preliminary determinants of consequence of GERD. And then what are the complications? So esophagitis, as I said, that when there is repetitive exposure of the gastric contents, reflexuate, then it causes esophagitis. And then if it is, even though if it is further progress, it causes erosive esophagitis. And what is esophageal strictures? Strictures means, see, if you consider a normal pipe, if it is like hollow and straight continuously, it is normal. If you bend it or twist it at some or the other point, it causes some kind of folding and the passage will be narrow end. That is, we call it as stricture. The same thing happens in case of esophageal strictures. Because of high inflammation, it becomes narrow. The passage will become narrow at some or the other point, that we call it as esophageal stricture. It has to be cleared immediately or else it leads to worsened conditions. And then Barrett esophagus, that means the condition of these esophagus gets changed, and esophageal adenocarcinoma, and also it causes carcinoma. That means squamous epithelium will be converted into other kind of epithelium. So these are the complications of GERD. And then coming to clinical presentations. So what are the symptoms? Symptoms based on GERD with or without esophageal tissue injury. That means initial stages, that in the mild stages, even though there is no injury to the esophageal lining, but it causes some kind of symptoms. They are heartburn. That means immediately when the contents are refluxed into the stomach, into the esophagus, it causes heartburn. That means burning sensation in the epigastric region, which we term it as in heart, like which the patients express it as heartburn generally. And sometimes it may radiate to the neck. From here, it may radiate to the neck. Activities that reverse and reflex are recumbent position, bending over, and eating a high fat meal. That means immediately after you are taking food and you are laying down. That means head down. If you are lying in that way, the contents may get like according to gravity, the contents may get reflexed into the esophagus if you are positioning in that way after eating food. And then bending over, and after taking the food immediately if you bend over in this way, that also causes this kind of symptoms. And eating a high fat meal, if you are taking high fat meal also, it will worsen the reflex. And the other symptoms are water brush. Water brush means hypersalivation. Why this salivation takes place? Generally saliva gets released in order to neutralize the acid. That means in order to buffer the acid. So that means it indicates that when there is hypersalivation, that is increased salivation, it indicates that there is more production of acid or there is more exposure of acid in the esophagus. So it is shown as a symptom called that is water brush. Belching, that is expelling out gas from the mouth. And regurgitation, that means regurgitation means if we keep something like a spoon or something into the mouth, then it will cause some kind of that kind of thing is called as regurgitation. And then alarm symptoms. Alarm symptoms means which symptoms which may the patient be panic or dysphagia, odynophagia, bleeding, and weight loss. What is dysphagia? Like they won't be having feel to eat, that is dysphagia. And odynophagia means the smell will be a bit different, like they won't be feeling to eat it properly. And bleeding, when there is more inflammation, it leads to bleeding. And weight loss, as there is dysphagia, the patient may have anorexia. That means if you won't eat properly, automatically the weight will be lost. And then tissue injury based GE. These are the symptoms. They may have the injury or they may not have injury, but this is tissue injury based GERD. The symptoms will be esophagitis. That means once the tissue is damaged, it indicates that it is complicated. So the complications are, what are the complications are there? They will be considered as symptoms. Esophagitis, esophageal strictures, Barrett esophagus, and esophageal adenocarcinoma. I have explained already about these terms. And then extraesophageal symptoms. That means other than the symptoms in the esophagus, what are the symptoms? That means it includes chronic cough. Why? Because as it is getting reflexated into the esophagus, it causes chronic cough. In order to remove that or in order to expel that, we'll be having chronic cough. And laryngitis, as it is acidic in nature, even if it's not, it also affects this larynx and causes inflammation. And then asthma, because of narrowing of these vessels, valves. And dental enamel erosion. When this reflexate comes out, sometimes it will be vomited, right? So as the contents of this vomiting is acidic in nature, when it gets entered into the mouth, it causes dental enamel erosion. As it is acidic in nature, it will erode the dental enamel. So these are the clinical symptoms. So one is system-based GERD with or without tissue injury, and the other is with tissue injury. So here the complications will be seen. Here the symptoms are like heartburn, mainly heartburn and warm sensation, and it may radiate to the neck. So these are the tissue-based. And extraesophageal symptoms include chronic cough, laryngitis, asthma, and dental enamel erosion. And what are the causes? This is the etiology. I said that decreased ileus pressure is and increased intra-abdominal pressure. So as I said that, what are the things which will cause decreased ileus pressure? Foods like fatty meal, carbonatives, that means peppermint, spearmint, that things, chocolate, caffeine, coffee, cola, tea, garlic, onions, chili peppers, all these causes decreased ileus pressure. And what are the medications which cause decreased ileus pressure? Are anticholinergics, barbiturates, dihydropyridine, calcium channel blockers, dopamine, and estrogen. So these are the medications which cause decrease in the ileus pressure. And then direct irritants to the esophageal mucosa, which cause direct irritation to the esophageal mucosa. Some foods like spicy foods, orange juice, that means it will be having citric acid. Tomato juice, even it's having some citric acid, and coffee, and all this causes direct irritation to the esophageal mucosa. And the medicines like aspirin, that as aspirin's like it's how does it cause irritation? I have explained already in PUD. So once again you go through it. And NSAID is also the same: iron, tobacco, and quinidine. So all these causes direct irritation to the esophageal mucosa. So this is the etiology of GERD. So one is decreased LES pressure, the other is direct irritants to the esophageal mucosa. And what are the foods that cause and what are the medications that cause? Just have a look over through it and just remind that. And then diagnosis. First and foremost thing in the diagnosis, we have to assess the patient clinically, and we have to collect the patient's clinical history. What is his history? In that, the clinical history of the patient will be taken, and then endoscopy is done to assess any mucosal. If there is any tissue injury, how can we know that? That thing will be known only, that thing we can see only when we go for endoscopy. And then ambulatory pH monitoring. Ambulatory pH monitoring means whatever the contents which comes out, we'll have to, whatever the reflex it comes out, we have to monitor its pH, so that we can come to know whether it's GERD or not. And then esophageal manometry, combined impedance pH monitoring, high resolution esophageal pressure topography, empiric trial of a proton pump inhibitor. That means we'll start the patient on proton pump inhibitor. If he gets responded to that, we can consider it's related to some kind of acidic problem. Okay. So these are the diagnostic methods. So mostly we'll go for clinical history and endoscopy. And those even these symptoms between PUD and GERD will be almost similar. So when when we consider the GERD patient as a PUD patient and we start on giving medications and all, but the patient is not responding, then we have to go and check it whether it is GERD or not. The major difference is here the patient will be having like water brush will be there. That is, in GERD there will be water brush will be there, which is not seen in PUD. So till here we have discussed these topics, and even the epidemiology is the studying the epidemiology is difficult even in this case, because we all experience GERD in one or the other time when we are taking heavy fat meal, or when we sit immediately, or when we lay down immediately after having food, or when we are taking all these kind of medications. Like some or the other time we'll be experiencing this GERD. So it is a bit very difficult for us to know the epidemiology. Like we cannot calculate the incidence and prevalence in a proper way. Okay, the statistics can't be given properly. And then coming to treatment. So before going to study the treatment, we must have some goals to treat. What are the goals of treating this patient? So first is, in any condition, in any disease, first thing what we have to do is we have to reduce the symptoms, or we have to eliminate the symptoms and decrease the frequency and duration of gastroesophageal reflux. That means we should try to reduce the reflux of contents into the esophagus, and its frequency and the duration of exposure, that also we have to decrease. And then we have to promote healing of this injured mucosa, which helps that will be done by EGF, epidermal growth factor. So we should promote healing and then prevent development of complications. So once it is diagnosed, or once it is diagnosed earlier, then only we can prevent the complications, right? So these are the points to be remembered. First is to reduce the complications or eliminate the symptom, to reduce or eliminate the symptoms, decrease the frequency and duration of gastroesophageal reflux, and we have to promote healing of the mucosal injury and also to prevent the complications. So these are the goals of treatment, right? So it includes first lifestyle changes, and then therapy with antacids and non-prescription acid suppression therapy like with PPAs or H2 receptor antagonists, and pharmacological treatment with prescription strength acid suppression therapy and anti-reflex surgery. So anti-reflex surgery can be done only when it is complicated. So here we follow two kinds of approaches. That is, one is step-up approach and the other is step-down approach. The name itself indicates step up means we are increasing the dose from low to high. Step down means from high to low. So step up, in a step up approach, starting we shall start with lifestyle changes. With small lifestyle changes, we'll try to improve the patient. And if it's not done, then we'll go to non-prescription acid suppression therapy. And even though if it is not getting relieved, then we'll go for pharmacological prescription strength acid suppression therapy. Even though it's not responding, then we'll go for anti-reflux surgery. So this is a step-up approach. That means from lifestyle changes to anti-reflux surgery. And then what is a step-down approach? Here we'll start with prescription strength acid suppression therapy, that is PPAs or H2 receptor antagonists in high doses, and then stepping down to low dose. First we'll start with high doses initially to maintain the patient or to revert the patient back to normal, and then we'll step down to lowest dose, and then we'll control the symptoms. So this is a step down approach. And then other is patient directed therapy. Patient directed therapy means they can take the treatment by themselves by taking some kind of non-prescription acid suppression medications. So this can be encouraged only if the condition is mild, or if the symptoms are very mild, this can be encouraged, or else that should not be done. Like non-prescription medication should not be given. Patient with some continuous symptoms lasting longer than 2 weeks should seek medical attention. So they cannot further continue like taking their own medications. That is not proper. So if the symptoms are continuing for more than 2 weeks, it's very necessary for them to take a medical attention. So what are the non-pharmacological therapy we are going to give? So first I said, when the patient is lying down immediately after food, it causes GERD, right? So what we have to do, we should ask the patient to elevate his head. By like in hospitals, we can find that kind of beds which can be adjustable. Like we can make it into 45 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, or 180. So in that way, like we have to elevate the head of the patient. And then, or some, if it is not possible, if the patient is at home, then we have to keep more number of pillows under his neck, so that the position will be like this. Like in approximately 30 to 45 degrees we have to keep, so that the contents may not get upwards into the esophagus. And then weight reduction for overweight or obese patients. Why? In case of obese patients, here the intra-abdominal pressure will be increased due to his tummy. He'll be having intra-abdominal pressure will be more, right? So thereby also it causes reflection of these contents into the esophagus. So we have to advise the patient for weight reduction in case of obese patients. And then avoid foods that decrease the LES pressure. As I said in the etiology, some foods causes a decreased LES pressure, so that foods should be avoided. And include protein rich meals to augment LES pressure. So we have to give protein rich meals so that the LES pressure will be increased. And avoid foods which cause direct irritation to the mucosal, esophageal mucosa should be avoided. And as I said that when you are taking heavy and fat meals, that also causes GERD. So we should advise a patient to take small food in regular intervals, and to avoid fat diets. And we should tell them not to sleep immediately after taking food. At least they should sit or walk or do some activities, some other activities, at least for 3 hours if possible. And then stop smoking, as it causes local and mucosal irritation. Avoid alcohol, as it also causes irritation, and also it will decrease LES pressure. And then avoid tight fitting clothes. Why? Because they are also, if you're having these tight fitting clothes, it causes some further suffocation, and also it causes so we have to avoid these tight fitting clothes. And if you want to take the medications which cause irritation to the esophageal mucosa, and it is mandatory, then what you should do, to take in the upright position with plenty of water so that it gets easily passed out. So for mandatory medications which require esophageal which cause irritation of the esophageal mucosa, in that condition you have to stand and take the tablet, and then that too along with more amount of water, so that gets easily passed into the stomach. So these are the lifestyle changes. Then what are therapeutic interventions? So as we know, the treatment part mainly depends on the pathophysiology. Like what are the targets, what are the mechanism which causes the disease. If we stop that, we may treat the patient. So that is a thing we'll be keeping it in mind. As I said that there will be decreased esophageal clearance, so we have to target this point. And then esophageal mucosal resistance, if it is lost, the acid directly attacks this mucosal lining and epithelial lining, so we have to target this. And decreased LES pressure causes, so we have to use a medication which increase LES pressure. And gastric acid, when there is excess production of gastric acid, then also it may get refluxated, so we have to neutralize the excess gastric acid which is present. And gastric emptying, the food contents, if there will be delayed gastric emptying in case of GERD, so we have to fasten the gastric emptying. So these are the targets, right? Esophageal clearance and mucosal resistance, LES pressure has to be improved, gastric acid production has to be neutralized, excess which is produced has to be neutralized, gastric emptying has to be improved. So as I said, here is a small picture showing what are the causes of GERD, like low stomach acid, too much gas, what are the parasites, and hiatal hernia, that means pregnancy, because these two increases the intra-abdominal pressure. These also intra-abdominal pressure is increased. Tight fitted clothing also increases intra-abdominal pressure. Wrong posture, it will decrease the LES pressure. Larger meals, cigarette smoking, and some medications, and H. pylori infection only in some cases, too much of exercise, magnesium deficiency, low chloride diet. So all these causes GERD. And then so here we go. How to approach therapeutic approach to GERD in adults. If there is intermittent and mild heartburn, the condition is very mild. First, initially we should tell them some kind of lifestyle modifications regarding the posture, regarding how to take meals, and what the food should be avoided. All these things like lifestyle modifications we have to do. Along with that, we should give some patient-directed therapy. That will give antacids, antacids like Malox or Milanta 30 ml, and Gaviscon syrup will be given, calcium carbonate. All these, what will they do? They will neutralize this acid. So these are all alkaline in nature. They will neutralize the acid. So first thing is antacids, depending on which we can give. And then along with that, we can give tablets like cimetidine, famotidine, nizatidine, ranitidine. These are H2 receptor antagonists, or non-prescription PPIs like omeprazole or lansoprazole. These are in low doses. So that can be given along with this. Either this or this along with this should be given. Like antacids along with any PPI or H2 receptor antagonist in low dose can be given along with. And also the patient should be said about some kind of lifestyle changes. So we cannot give lifestyle modifications, like we cannot make a chart and give it to everybody. So depending on each and individual patient, we have to tell the lifestyle changes so that only the symptoms can be seen earlier. Clear? This is for intermittent mild heartburn. The other is symptomatic relief of GERD. So in this condition, if the intermittent or mild stage is crossed, then we have to give prescription strength acid suppression therapy. That means here the dose is doubled compared to the first intermittent condition. In this also, first we have to give lifestyle modification. First we have to say them lifestyle modifications. Along with that, we have to give prescription strength and acid suppression therapy. H2 receptor antagonist or BPS. And high doses will be given here. In that condition, along with lifestyle modifications, antacids, and low dose H2 receptor antagonist or PPI is given. Here antacids are not given, only these things are given, but in higher doses. And for typical symptoms, treat empirically with prescription strength anti-acid suppression therapy. If the symptoms further reoccurs, most patients require standard doses they require higher doses, may be required. That is, MT here stands for maintenance therapy. If symptoms recur, initially will relieve the patients. That means initially we give aggressive treatment and then they should be given maintenance therapy. Mild GERD can usually be treated effectively with H2 receptor antagonists. Patients with moderate to severe symptoms should receive PPS as initial therapy. If it is mild, it's better to take H2 receptor antagonist. If the symptoms are more, then we can go for PPS. Then this is the complication, right? Erosive esophagitis is a complication. How do we treat this condition? In this also we'll say some lifestyle modifications along with a course duration of PPS, that is for 4 to 16 weeks depending on the severity of the GERD in that particular patient. PPS is for 4 to 16 weeks, or high dose H2 receptor antagonist for 8 to 12 weeks. That means it will be given for 4 months, and this will be given for 4 weeks, 16 weeks. That means 4 months. Here 12 weeks. Yes, 3 months. Like a course they should be taken. And for typical alarm symptoms are there, we have to go for endoscopy, and in that endoscopy we can see the injured part and to what extent it is injured. And also, if at all possible, we take a sample from that and we'll send it for biopsy and to evaluate the mucosa. Like sometimes there may be carcinoma. So in order to rule out all these things, we'll take the sample, biopsy sample, and then we'll start with PPIs initially, and then for the duration of 4 to 16 weeks, then we'll go for maintenance therapy till the complications and the symptoms get resolved. Even if the patient are not responding to pharmacological therapy and the symptoms are atypical, then it is evaluated via manometry or abdominal reflex monitoring. That is how this abdominal reflex can be done. That is monitored, and if it is abnormal, then we'll go for anti-reflex surgery. So antacids like Gaviscon. So here you can see that sodium alginate, sodium bicarbonate, calcium carbonate. So all these are antacids. They act as buffer and they will neutralize the acid in the stomach. Generally, Gaviscon is mostly used here. So what does it do? It forms a solution which floats on the surface of the gastric contents. So this is the gastric contents, this is the esophagus, this is the stomach, right? If this is the stomach, this is the esophagus. And it acts as a barrier in between these two. It forms a layer and it will float over that gastric contents, and thereby it prevents these contents from getting refluxated into the esophagus. But they have a very short duration of action. So it requires frequent administration. That means daily they have to take 4 or 5 times a day to provide continuous acid neutralization. So taking antacids after meals can increase duration from 1 to 3 hours. So duration of action can be increased when we take these antacids after food. Nighttime acid suppression cannot be maintained with bedtime doses. Like nighttime, because as it is short duration of action, if we give once at night, it's not sufficient. Why I said that if it is better if you take after food. Why? Because after taking food already, it gets a bit neutralized, and this it requires so much of time for the food to get digested, and then to release excess acid, and then to get refluxated. In the meanwhile, this will be helpful. So it increases the duration of action if we take the after food. And then proton pump inhibitors, you have already know the mechanism of action, its side effects, and everything, you know. So like dexlansoprazole, lansoprazole, omeprazole, pantoprazole, rabeprazole, all you have studied in the PUD. And what are drug interactions? They'll decrease the absorption of, like as it causes basic nature, like it will decrease the, increase the H plus ions, and it makes the contents to be alkaline in nature. But if we take some drugs like ketoconazole and itraconazole, they require acidic medium to show its action and to gets absorbed. But what will happen if you are taking PPIs and along with this itraconazole and ketoconazole, they cannot be absorbed properly because it causes alkaline nature, but it requires acidic nature. So because of this, they cannot be taken, they cannot be absorbed properly. And then inhibition of cytochrome P450, which is a major enzyme which is required for metabolism of majority of the drugs, is inhibited. And so, so thereby it decreases the effectiveness of clopidogrel, which requires this enzyme for its metabolism. And then PPIs degrade in acidic environment and are therefore formulated in delayed release. So PPIs, they get what they get degrade. That means they get broken down immediately in the acidic medium. So what we will do, we'll formulate them in a way that they provide some delayed release capsules or tablets. That means the drug will be released slowly and slowly. If you see that PAN-DSR, PAN-D means PAN-DSR, sustained release tablets. That is pantoprazole and domperidone sustained release tablets. So in that way, they are available as capsules, so that they cannot be degraded immediately. And patients should take oral PPIs in the morning 15 to 30 minutes before breakfast. So they should be as because by the time it releases gastric acid, it will combines with it and decreases this acidic condition. So it should be taken 15 to 30 minutes before breakfast. And if you take it along with the food, what does it happen? It does not show any effect. So we should give, even if we take in the night times, we should give this 15 to 30 minutes before the food. So how these delayed release capsules are designed, right? So there are two kinds of granules will be kept in that. If you can open that capsule, you can see two different colors of granules will be seen. So the first thing is release 1. It comprises 20%, 25% of the total dose and is released at pH 5.5 within 1 to 2 hours of dosing. So it shows its effect within 1 to 2 hours of dosing, and it contains only 25% of the total dose. And then release 2, it combines 75% of the dose and it is released as the pH 6.75. That means after some time of you take food, it will be released. So it shows 4 to 5 hours after dosing. So the effect will be, so in this way, how can you, so the effect of that capsule can be for a long duration. We can extend the duration of this effect of this capsule. So in this way, they are prepared, delayed release capsules. So IV form available are pantoprazole, lansoprazole. Omeprazole and bicarbonate combination is available. It's a PPI and this is an antacid. This can be given for mild stage. It's an OTC and over-the-counter capsule. And this is also delayed release capsules. As I said that it will be available in 2 different forms. Remember this again, this will come in the next topic. Then H2 receptor antagonists like cimetidine, ranitidine, famotidine, nizatidine. These can be given in the initial stages, that is sufficient. If it is not responding, then only we can go for PPAs in case of GERD. So low dose can be given in case of mild cases. If they are not responding, they require higher doses. They may be hypersecretaries of gastric acid and require higher doses. Then what are the drug interactions? So it may inhibit the metabolism of certain drugs like theophylline, warfarin, phenytoin, nifedipine, and propranolol. Because they are all efficacious, selection of the specification should be based on difference in pharmacokinetic safety profile and cost. So these are the drug interactions of H2 receptor antagonists. And then cimetidine, ranitidine, or Rantac or Zentac is the commonly used thing. We can see in case of H2 receptor antagonists. See, this is cimetidine tablets. Ranitidine injection is also available. Even tablet is available. Zentac injection is available. And then pro-motility agents. Pro-motility agents is for patient with a known motility defect, that is decreased, example, LES incompetence, decreased esophageal clearance, delayed gastric emptying. At that kind, these pro-motility agents are very helpful. Like metoclopramide, it will increase the LES pressure in a dose, small manner, and accelerates gastric emptying. So as it will increase LES pressure, the contents gets easily passed from the esophagus into the stomach. So and from there to the duodenum. But it does not improve esophageal clearance. Esophageal clearance cannot be done, but only LES pressure can be increased, so the gastric emptying can be improved. The common adverse reactions include somnolence, nervousness, fatigue, dizziness, weakness, depression, diarrhea, and rash. Bethanical has limited value because of side effects. So metoclopramide and bethanical, these two are the pro-motility agents. Because of more side effects, bethanical is not used in a limited manner. And then mucosal protections, sucralfate. This is a common syrup you find in everybody's house. So it's an aluminum salt of sucrose octasulfate. So what does it do? it will make a layer, coating layer on this mucosa, and it will prevent the acid directly getting attacked on this mucosal layer. And then combination therapy, as I said, that Zegrid, it's a combination of omeprazole and antacid. It's better if you use in case of nocturnal GERD. When the symptoms are more at night, you can use this combination of medication. And then maintenance therapy, even after long-term usage of some medications, the patient has improved, but there is a chance of getting recurrent attacks. In that conditions, we have to go for maintenance therapy. And also to prevent further complications. So what does we do? Here we'll give dose, reduced dose will be given, but for a longer duration, like on a daily basis, they have to take these medications. H2 receptor antagonist may be more effective. And for the patients who are with mild disease, if they are with severe esophagitis, then we have to give PPAs as a maintenance therapy. If it is mild, we can give H2 receptor antagonist as maintenance therapy. That too in lower doses can be given. And then, so this is about the medications. So once again, we can recall that. So first and foremost thing is antacids. How does it act? They'll form a float, they'll make a floating layer and they'll inhibit it from getting refluxated. And the other is antacids after PPAs and H2 receptor antagonists, about that. And then pro-motility agents, they'll increase the LES pressure